to get in here. Thank you, Samanish. So welcome to our subgroup data session, where we are going to be primarily talking about data questions people have about legal issues related to STRs, what this group can do and can't do. The goal of this meeting is to get your questions out to our colleagues at KP Law to make sure that they know what it is we want to know. And then we're going to ask them to then present their answers to the full group. So given the time that we have, I want us as much as possible to focus on the questions and not on the answers today, right? So the goal here is not for you to get your legal questions answered. The goal here is for you to raise the legal questions that you have, that you think are important for the group as a whole to understand, in order for the group to craft really good policies, and or at least understand what kind of the range of options are, and what, as we heard from people at the very beginning, what we can't do, right? Because that's as important as knowing what we potentially can do. So that's our goal here today. I have a few things that members have asked me to bring forward to this conversation, but let me just start by opening it up to you all. So I see some real hands and some virtual hands. So let me start with Peter Schaefer.
Okay, John, can you fill me in on what the law is in terms of, or if there is any law, in terms of somebody, let me give you the scenario. Somebody goes to a bank and borrows $1 million based on the law in Nantucket at that point, or the zoning where they're allowed to rent, or and then we change the zoning and they're not allowed to rent, and they default on the loan. Can they sue us? I mean, where does that stand?
No, they cannot sue you. I'm not supposed to be giving answers,
Right.
but if there's a quick and dirty answer,
if it's a simple one, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Stacy, did you send around my email yesterday?
I didn't, because it was in response to questions that had been asked by one stakeholder that he asked me to raise at this meeting, but I can raise at least what those questions were. And so let me just start framing there. So someone did.
Breaking up. Stacey, you're freezing. We can't hear you.
She's the only one that's frozen too.
Stacey, you're frozen. We can't hear you.
Yeah.
I'll send her a message and let her know.
All right.
In the meantime, maybe David, do you want to ask your question? And we
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, sorry about that. I changed Wi-Fi. Hopefully that helps. So one of the questions that I got from one of our members who couldn't be at this call today was about grandfathering. And I think that was a little bit the question we just heard from Peter as well, with a slightly different twist. And we got a good answer that was actually, I think, will be really helpful, John, to present to the group, as I said, which is really about the difference between general bylaws and zoning bylaws, and how those might have different flexibilities and different rules around grandfathering. And so I don't.
And Stacey, what I would suggest is, to the extent we're able, and we should be able to do this, is after this meeting, I'll record all the questions. And I will prepare a document to send it back to you. And I will include in that document the questions that were asked in the email and my responses. So everyone on the group will have, will be privy to the questions and the answers.
That's great. And I think that'll go to the full committee in advance of your presentation, or in advance of will it be Alex who's presenting at the meeting, John?
Oh, well, Alex is going to be at the meeting. I guess I want to know what you think his role should be. We can do whatever you want, but there will be a document where we will have outlined all of the legal issues and our answers. And so Alex could certainly go through those and answer any questions that people might have.
Yeah, okay,
So that'd be the plan, Alex, okay?
okay.
Good.
All right, let me go to David.
Great, thank you. Through you, of course. John, could you please, and with all due respect, we've gotten a few different kind of readings from you on 39. So I think it would be helpful for us as a board to understand really the extent of what we can do with 39. Because I know that the planning board's intention when we brought that forward was to make all of the tools available through the Enabling Act to be represented in 39. So I think it would be helpful for us as a group for you to give us a final reading on that so that we can understand, A, if we need to go back and 39 or and as good as it stands. So I think that's it for me.
Okay. Yep. I can do that.
Perfect. That's all I have to ask. And for the group, 39 is the bylaw that we passed at town meeting to register and regulate short-term rentals.
So the very short answer to that is Article 39 was intended to create a short-term rental registration program. And while it does allow, there's nothing in that bylaw that regulates the operation of short-term rentals. It did permit for the adoption of regulations, which have been adopted now, as you know, by the Board of Health and the Select Board. If this work group is interested in actual regulation of short-term rentals, such as regulating the form of ownership of the unit, regulating where they can be located, putting a limit on the number of days someone might be able to rent their home on a short-term rental basis, I think it's pretty clear under the statute that that's going to require a bylaw, which means further action by town meeting. And that is the charge of this committee, is to come up with recommendations for bylaws. Now, one of the things you're going to have to deal with, is it going to be zoning or general? And when you see the response I sent to Stacy yesterday, there are some pros and cons for each. And that's really a policy question as to how this committee wants to make their recommendations.
Okay, thanks. John.
Yeah, John, this may have been covered a little bit, but anyway, two things. One is, wherever we settle with, our recommendations, what's the legal position regarding whatever we agree we want, whether in duration and maximum and minimum, all that? What's the difference between, though, legally, an individual who is just really renting out to cover some of their expenses versus, I'll say corporation, commercial, whatever the word is, that's doing it to create a profit? Legally, can we enforce anything that says, well, the rules are the same, but you can't do it because you are some kind of corporate entity, but you can do it because you're an individual who may or may not live on the island, but you do use it. I'm just wondering what's in the toolbox, John, in terms of can we actually have different rules for different kind of entities?
Yeah, and let me broaden that a little bit, John, because I think it's other things we've heard too, is beyond like, can you ban one, can you even differentiate these? And if so, how, right? And one question might be, can you, right? It might be by amount of time that they, by limiting how much time they can rent. And or even creating, can you create different cost structures or incentive structures beyond certain amounts to incentivize or to, right? Like what's the sort of most creative way to think about how you might, if the group is really interested in differentiate, like, let me just put, I get the sense there are lots of people in the group who are really interested in differentiating those cases. And we know they're potentially difficult to differentiate. So how, if at all, could you possibly imagine differentiating those?
Yes,
You don't
okay,
need to, again, answer it now, but to just,
right,
that's one of the things people want to know.
sure. I've already mentioned that the short-term rental law allows bylaws that regulate the operation by class of operators. So what does that mean? I think that means exactly what John is getting at. You know, if it's purely a commercial operation as opposed to the individual homeowner that's renting it, it may be they're renting their house in order to pay the mortgage or whatever. There's also the difference between if it's your primary residence or not. I would have to caution you all, however, that any final review, legal review, is going to depend upon exactly what you come up with, because there are constitutional issues that can arise here. There is a case out of the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans that said if you restrict short-term rentals to primary residences, that violates the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. So while the statute has pretty broad language about what your discretion is, there's a whole nother layer of constitutional issues that have to be considered.
Okay, thanks. Kathy?
Yeah, because John, just to finish, so because the reason for my question is, I don't think, you know, any of us want to spend a lot of time on things that sound great, but actually have no chance to be, you know, legally enforced.
Yeah. And one other piece to maybe add to that, John, is the question about how many properties someone might operate. Like, can you restrict people to, you may only have one property, or you may only have two properties that are available, or you know, they can only have this many short-term rental permits or whatever, that those kind of questions.
Yep.
Kathy?
I have a couple of questions, and I will email you them in any case. If I don't want to hog the time here, but a couple of questions is one, can we put some sort of a sunset clause on any of the kinds of things we come up with? That's one question, whether it's a zoning or a general bylaw. And also, for the purposes of, let's see, let me just get down to this one here, sorry. Just I'd like some information on the series of, you know, lawsuits and the zoning complaints that have recently come out in the press here. There's the, you know, two of them that are in the zoning review. For the one that's in a lawsuit now, that's the Grape family lawsuit. I guess my question is, if that were to come down and the decision was that it was considered to be a commercial use in a residential area, which is what I believe the lawsuit is saying, would that mean that short-term rentals, all short-term rentals on the island would be become illegal as of that decision? Whether, you know, regardless of who owns the property, would they be illegal? Would that affect the use of our 31 or 32-day rentals, which are, you know, which could also be considered commercial? You know, so what is the legal difference? You know, how far and wide would this decision play? And then, is there any kind of a stopgap measure the town or that we could take to protect homeowners from having that hit them, you know, we don't know when that decision will come down. So those are a couple of questions I had, and also I didn't hear if there was something on grandfathering or previously permitted use, but that's a question. What does that mean? Where does that apply?
Yep, I can address all those questions.
Okay.
Okay, Karen.
Morning. I could really use sort of a primer on just zoning on Nantucket in general, and I wondered if anybody
Oh,
else
geez.
could,
Okay.
well, and I'm not saying that's yours, John, but just I wondered if there might be some other speaker who could give us a brief kind of, or point me in the direction of something that is a little bit simpler to understand. I've been like looking at all the maps and trying to understand what each one means, and just a really brief kind of primer on all of that would be helpful. Either, you know, if other people would be interested, or if somebody can point me in the direction of where to get that, that would be awesome.
Karen, I would suggest that the best way to accomplish that goal would be to contact the planning director or the assistant planning director for sort of a basic 101 course on zoning on Nantucket. So that would be either Leslie. Do you know Leslie Schnell?
Well, we have Megan here as our representative.
I'm sorry.
From the, we have Megan here.
Oh.
She just made herself visible. So she's our liaison. So
Megan.
I think that's a good question that goes to you, Megan. And we sort of discussed it. It sort of fell off the plate. So let's make sure we talk about how to bring that in.
Yeah, I think I'd be happy to schedule any
Thanks.
sort of one-on-one session with anyone. I think you all have my email address if you'd like to do that. I think it might also be helpful. I can send out a link to our zoning bylaw. You all probably are familiar with the maps and, you know, the basics of ground cover and that sort of thing. But I think also the use chart might be something that's helpful to kind of comb through and see what's allowed in each zoning district. So I'd be happy to send that along. And if you want further follow-up or have more specific questions, please reach out.
I mean, I actually
Thank you.
think it would probably be helpful to do a little 101 primer for the full group, because yeah, it's a topic, it gets everybody on the same page and gives them all a chance to know what's going on. So we could talk about getting that on the agenda. Colin. Waiting, I know you raised your actual hand at the same
okay.
time.
Thank you. First, John, I appreciate your time. As I'm a fellow member of the bar, and I know how difficult it is to give opinions, particularly on the fly. I wanted to, though, to focus you on this issue of primary residence versus seasonal residence and the STR, and of course the Fifth Circuit case that you mentioned, which is just came down in August. The concern is that there's in the group there have already been indications that there may be people wanting to distinguish based on primary versus seasonal, but and then saying that, well, Massachusetts hasn't ruled on this yet. You know, the Massachusetts land bank case, which is a pretty low level court, never even addressed this particularly. So it may be, and then John, I think properly said, you know, why should we be wasting all of our time if, you know, we come up with this and then down the road the court's going to rule on a constitutional issue, which is, you know, which the Fifth Circuit has already ruled on. I think it would be helpful to get your seasoned opinion on the likelihood of that. Obviously, you can't guarantee it one way or the other, but that Fifth Circuit opinion is pretty strong and pretty well reasoned. And I hate to see us, you know, go down and spend a lot of time on trying to distinguish between two groups, ultimately to find that it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Peter, as you well know, different circuit courts of appeals approach cases very differently. And the Fifth Circuit is known for being very conservative, right? Whereas, you know, the First Circuit which is where we are, may have a different view. And so then you wind up with what's called a conflict in the circuits. And the only way that can be resolved is going to the Supreme Court on a writ of certiorari to get the final definitive answer. The good news is I'm a member of the Supreme Court bar, so, but I will be probably long retired before that ever happens.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, so I assume that you all can give your best judgment as to We do that, we as lawyers do it every day in our, as to, the law is never, it's never black and white. We give our views on the strength of arguments and the weaknesses of arguments.
Yeah.
Presume you could do that.
Yep.
Well, and I presume that because if there's uncertainty, like the decision is going to be made by the town, right? As to whether they legally are comfortable with pursuing a particular path. So, I mean, it is actually kind of your call, right? Or like your call in combination with the town, right?
You're
In
talking
terms of like, sure, that people can sue you, but
Yes,
whether
but-
or not we're going to pass a thing, is going to be up to the town.
Yeah, and yes, that's correct. And also remember that any bylaw that you pass, whether it's general or zoning, has to go first to the Attorney General's office for approval. And the Attorney General could potentially disapprove a bylaw that distinguishes between primary and seasonal residents. That's a possibility. Oftentimes they will approve the bylaw with a big caution about potential constitutional issues. And it's hard to predict how the AG will act. But even if the AG approves the bylaw, that bylaw would certainly be vulnerable to legal challenges. I'm not saying you would lose, but just because the AG approves it doesn't mean that a court would not find it unconstitutional.
Yeah, helpful. Thank you, Julia.
Hi, John. Hi, everyone.
Julia.
Just going back to the idea of the zoning primer, I know you sort of cringed at the idea of teaching us all what zoning means, but I do think there might be, even for the public's, benefit, if it's just like, you don't have to drill down into necessarily what our zoning laws necessarily, those are all complicated, but just the idea of like, what's zoning and what's general bylaw, right? Like, because I know I repeat myself a lot with folks when I talk about, zoning is land use. And that's why, that's not where necessarily you might be regulating, who owns the property. It's how they use it, right? Those types of, very basic messages, and whether it's you or whether it's, Leslie or someone else, but
Yeah, okay. No.
Just a small maybe version would be, I think.
Yeah, I think what I would do in that circumstance, I think once you read my email that I wrote yesterday, Julia, I think a lot of these questions could potentially be answered by that email. But certainly if this group wants an overview of zoning, that is something that we could certainly provide at a future meeting. I would probably ask Alex to do that because his practice is like 100% land use, zoning, planning, conservation. So he would be a good person to give you that primer. But I think the real focus here, in my opinion, should be on general versus zoning. Mm-hmm. What is the best approach? How can you write that in a way that is consistent with the short-term rental law and case law? I will tell you that there was, very briefly, there was just a decision from the Supreme Judicial Court involving the town of Bourne. I think it came out in maybe August or September, that found that the town could enact a general bylaw regulating, I should say prohibiting retail marijuana stores in the town. And it did not have to be by zoning. And there's a whole sort of standard that the court looked at. And one of the critical standards is, did the town ever regulate that activity by zoning in the past? There's a case in Barnstable, the same thing. And the court said, no, in that case, they hadn't, so they could do it by general bylaw. My understanding is Nantucket has never regulated short-term rentals in your zoning bylaw. Instead, the building inspector has made the determination that they are permitted accessory uses. And that is, of course, I can't get into the details, but that's basically the issues in that Gray case.
Well, so that's really great to, I appreciate I think it isn't, you're right. It is important for people to understand because certainly it's been a, question as to how is zoning related to the general bylaw and do they have to be consistent? And I think that's what you're
Right.
talking about. So that's a great question to answer. The question of, just from my perspective, when I talk about short-term rentals, I often go back to just Styler and why we're here and what Styler, even, and I know KP Law has issued a, summary about it. And so maybe that's all that needs to be provided. But something that explains like sort of what you just said, which is what Kathy was asking, what if a case does get decided? What happens then? And I agree with you. And it seems like Styler was pretty clear in the last footnote of the decision that for a place like Nantucket, it would be an accessory use. But I don't know that I've ever seen that like in writing.
Well, that's certainly our opinion. We think that people should not get too excised about the Styler decision on Nantucket because the history, the tradition, everything is different.
Well, and it's
between Nantucket-
clear that they would say a customary accessory use, right, would be
Right.
allowed. So but I guess like giving people that I think would be, the background would be helpful because it's not the same implication for most Massachusetts community, right? We
That's
might
right.
not have a custom of vacation rentals. So my other thought is.
And just really quickly, Julia, so remember that when you have a land court or a superior court decision that comes out, that is not precedent, legal precedent. It's only legal precedent if it is appealed to the either the appeals court or the Supreme Judicial Court, and then you have a decision from the appellate court that says, for example, short-term rentals, no matter who is the owner operator, is a commercial use. If you ever got to that point, that would be a major, major problem on Nantucket. If you have an isolated case where one judge says that, it does not it's not binding precedent on anybody. I don't know if that is helpful for the group, but.
That makes sense. And I guess in a way, that's why the Styler case is not something that you can, it's not a Nantucket specific issue, but you can relate to it because it went to the highest.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And as did the Bourne case
Right.
on regulating an activity by general bylaw. And remember, the statute, I forget who said it, but zoning regulates uses and structures, but in this case, uses. The short-term rental law says towns can regulate by bylaw the operation of short-term rentals. So there's a difference between the operation and the use.
Yeah, thanks.
Can
Okay,
I
so
ask one
every-
more thing?
yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, because
Um,
I think we're all in the doubles now.
Right. So if I go into something that we have not talked about, what John brought up, John Kitchener brought up about like, what's the toolbox? It would be great if you showed that in terms of the different, either the ownership, as you mentioned, from the general bylaw perspective, or the use from a zoning perspective, what are the options to differentiate sort of the different types of, like operators or uses? So on both sides. And I know that, I'll go back to Article 43 for a second. It had the term accessory use, which was super unclear to most people because it's a town sort of decision as to how what you might decide, the ZBA what you might decide. So are you able to talk about, like I said, the ownership or the operators, the options there, but also on the use side, on the zoning side?
Yeah.
And that's it for me.
Great. All right, Kathy, back to you.
Okay, just want to go back, not on the zoning, just to have a legal answer to a question that I've gotten a whole bunch of people emailing me about, so I just thought I'd ask. The protocols that we adopted as the short-term rental working group the other day, for those of the members who have agreed to them, I just wanted to be sure that we were clear on what is permissible and what is not. It's clear that none of us may speak for the short-term rental working group. That's clear. But hypothetically, should a citizens article, warrant article come out that is regarding short-term rentals that we didn't create, so somebody places it on the warrant, and that particular warrant article is outside the consensus of the group, or maybe out of not acceptable to a member of the group, are there any restrictions on us in challenging that citizens warrant article publicly or privately or in any way, or do we need to remain silent on that as well? That was just
As an
question.
individual, Kathy, or as a group?
Either way, as a group. So let's say Nantucket Together does not like this article for whatever reason, and it's not, that's something we just need to keep silent on as a group, and that's fine. I just want to understand, because people are asking that question. Or can the short-term rental work group be supporting its own work and saying we're not supporting the other work? I think the work group itself as a body can take a vote on any petitioned article that comes in by November 14th, regulating short-term rentals. You can approve it, you can recommend it. I think that is because you will very likely have your own articles that you're recommending. And so I think it would be within the scope for the group to take a vote on other petitioned articles. As an individual member, not a member, but an individual resident of the island, and in your capacity as you attend town meeting, you are free to say whatever you want as an individual. The only thing you should do is when you get up to the microphone, and this would also be true at a finance committee meeting or a select board hearing, whatever, you have to make it clear that you are speaking as a private citizen and not a member of the work group. Can the work group or the select board, I guess, because they appointed you, prevent you from doing that? I don't think so. I think that would be a really bad idea, because you have First Amendment rights, you have the right to petition your government, and the town should not try to stifle the ability of an individual speaking as an individual from expressing their views.
Yeah, and the ground rules, just to be clear, are definitely not meant to stop you from being able to speak at town meeting. It is the hope that if there's a proposal that the work group comes up with and that you voted in favor of as part of the work group, and then it advances to town meeting,
yes,
the expectation is you are not going to stand up and speak against it. In any official capacity as the representative of the group that you were brought on. However, if the work group advances something that you voted against and it was advanced again without you, you certainly can stand up and speak against it. And if somebody else brings a proposal that you want to speak against as an individual, you're absolutely, the ground rules are definitely not meant to stop you from that either.
And you can give a minority report. That's what it's called at town meeting. Now, the other caveat, and this is a very big one, is if you have a conflict of interest. Let's say, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's say one of the big companies that operate short-term rentals on the island approaches you and says, we want you to get up at town meeting and argue in a particular way. Well, that could raise conflict of interest issues, because you're acting as an agent for a party that has an interest in the matter. So you should avoid that kind of thing. Obviously, I don't have to tell you that if somebody slips you $1,000 bill, if there are even such things, you cannot, because then, then you have a financial interest and you might go to jail. So you want to avoid any kind of a conflict of interest. I'm always available. If you have a question, you can email me, you can call me, and I'll help you on a confidential basis if it's a conflict of interest kind of question.
Okay, and I'm asking, I mean, there are, the number of the members are non-voting taxpayers, so they cannot speak in any case at town meeting.
Right.
Peter Schaefer.
Yeah, John, just as a question, nothing to do with housing. When I still talk to people, the biggest complaint I hear about the summer is the traffic. And that, not the parties, not any traffic. Would it be legal for us to have restrictions on how many cars a renter could bring over to the island? Or is that some sort of federal commerce thing that we get?
I think that would run afoul of the laws of the Commonwealth that basically allow vehicles on public ways. Now, could you get at it through parking? Yeah, probably. That's different than trying to prohibit someone from using public ways, whether they be town, county, or state highways on the island.
Well, what if they were allowed, let's say you got a token, you were allowed to bring 2 cars over? Is that still a restriction if they want to bring 5? I mean, I drive past houses now that are summer houses that have 5 cars in the driveway now. Never mind what's in there in the summer,
Peter, I don't know the answer to that question. We'd have to do some research.
Thanks, John.
Right. John Kishner.
Yeah, just a short follow-up. If we do get Megan or Leslie to give us all, a 101 on zoning, I'd suggest that we also give a little bit of time to Nathan Porter. He's the GIS map coordinator, and I'm not sure if everybody on our work group knows how to really, get into GIS maps and really mine the information out of it. But it's an incredible tool and it's there for everybody, but you do need to, have some basic understandings of it. So only if we do go ahead with Leslie or Megan, I would say maybe had Nathan to that and give us a GIS maps tutorial.
Yeah, and I would just say, John, I want to know if it, like, what it is that this is answering for the group that is really saliently going to help you solve your issues. Just having everybody know how to go in and play with the maps one-on-one and do their own thing and analysis. I just would want to know how that's going to help the group.
Yeah. So for me, when we talk about zoning districts, a very useful thing is to look at the GIS maps and see where the R1s are or the R5s are. That's what it's kind of there for. So if you want to know where the residential districts are, well, just go to GIS maps and take a look.
Yeah.
And that kind of question.
Right. Or we can ask the team in planning to create those maps for you.
Yeah,
So
I was going to say that too,
yeah.
Stacy. I think you have incredible staff in Nantucket.
Yeah.
And they can answer or provide a lot of data just if you ask them. So that might be a better way to do it, but it's up to you. If you want to tinker around with the GIS maps, they're online, you can do that. But I would start getting concerned about the reliability of the data if it's not being pulled by someone who uses those maps on a regular basis.
But if your question is like, people want to know if we're going to talk about the zoning map and the people want to be able to understand where the different uses are across the island, they could certainly present that information.
Yeah, that's really getting to it, because we talk about neighborhoods, we talk about zoning districts. It's all a little bit hypothetical if you don't know where they are.
Yeah, perfect, fine. David. David, you there?
You're muted, David.
This phone thing is too much. I can't wait to get home and get to my computer. I've got a few things. To follow up on John's GIS question, I think it's important that all our members are in some level self-sufficient in finding information. So I think that it would be wise for a brief tutorial just on GIS and the layers and how you access that, because in all honesty, and I'm not making excuses for them, our town staff is extremely busy and they're happy to help. But if we can be a little self-sufficient, I think that it would be more efficient for them and for the planning department, as well as just a little heads up for everyone. If you Google Nantucket E-codes, type in zoning use chart, it comes up. So there's a lot of ways to get information. And then I think when we really need town staff to fill us in, like to come and talk to us about zoning, I think that's important. But for the small stuff, I think I think it'll be helpful for everyone involved if there's a certain level of self-sufficiency in finding information. And I'm always happy to help if anyone asks me. And then the other thing is, if John, could you please include in your letter the enabling acts from 2000, or was it
Are you talking
20
about
or
the short-
19 or what?
you're talking about the short-term rental law?
I'm
right?
talking short. Exactly. Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes. And then on a final note, after we're done with this, Stacy, I would just like to talk group for a second about. So I'm just planting that seed. Thanks.
You would like to, sorry, say that again, David? I missed that.
Just have a second to speak to the group.
I see. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
After we're through with John. Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
and David, maybe you and I should chat a little more later just to make sure I understand, because one of the things I really want to do is make sure people are working from shared information. So it's not that I'm opposed to making sure people know how to do it themselves, but I want to really make sure that's helping forward then everybody comes in and says, well, I did my analysis using the GIS and it says this, and someone else says, well, I did my analysis from GIS and it says that. Like, I don't want that. That's what we don't want. So I'm not opposed to people learning how to use stuff, but I just want to make sure what we're doing here together is actually moving us forward with a common set of knowledge and facts.
Stacey, it's really just about all of us increasing our own knowledge base. It's not really about, trying to formulate different questions. It's just, this is a very incredibly good resource, and to not look at it, especially when we want to talk about anything around zoning bylaws, it's just useful to increase our own personal knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, my approach isn't about people taking that, formulating their own opinion, but when people have a simple question, it's easier for everyone involved for them to find that out themselves, and then they can come back and debate whatever to the group, right? But I just think that it's going to be more efficient for some of the smaller basic questions for them to find them themselves instead of clogging up Megan's email box or anyone else's. It's just my concern. I'm just trying to have a more efficient process.
Let me give a quick example and then I'll leave it. But for example, Stacy, if someone says, well, what is a lug 1 zone and where are they? We don't need to bother anyone with that. You just open up GIS maps and then just see the lug 1s and where they are. It's a 1-minute thing.
Yeah, okay. Leaving aside how that helps us solve the problem, but yeah, fair enough. Julia?
Thank you, Stacey. I was just going to bring something up super quickly, but it's not in reference to anything John it's about a different set of data. So I don't know if anybody else has any, I don't want to waste John's time. Can I mention it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so something to, staff doesn't have time, right? But one thing that's really helpful is when we had, in the context of data, in the context of what we've talked to Granicus about, like what are all the things that we could find out. We talked about GIS. Okay, so there's a set of data points that are attached to GIS, just even having the list of what those are, right? And for a lot of that's going to come from the assessor or from planning, right? But it's just a list. What are the, the identifiers? Like, what can you find out from what we have at our fingertips? And it's like, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, square footage, lot size, zoning, whether it's residential exemption or not. Like, there's a lot, even if we just had the list, I think it would help us. And that's a short, I think, answer, hopefully, for the team.
Yeah, helpful. Thanks, Julia. Kathy.
Okay, just a quick question. Is there going to be any public comment today?
Not today, no.
Oh, not today. Okay, I thought there was, because it was a public meeting. Just a quick question. And also
No,
some data.
public meetings do not require public comment.
Okay. I also have some data ideas or things to fill in the gaps. I think people seem to feel we definitely need the rest of the picture from the real estate viewpoint, so that can be deduped, as well as I don't know if Granicus is using the data, that the state database. We know that has some issues with it, but I think over time, as far back as we can go, to see what the trends are would be really helpful. I don't know the data scraping that they're doing. I don't know how far that goes back, but the real estate folks have a lot of data going back on active rentals and so forth. So I'm going to email you just some ideas along those lines as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And any more of those you want, I had thought Jeffrey was going to be here. Maybe I'm trying to see, like, maybe we forgot to invite him. Could be the problem. But we will forward any additional questions on the that kind of data side to Jeffrey, so he can keep moving that forward. Yeah. Great. Anything else that we've got for John right now and his team? John, anything else you need to check in with the group about?
I don't think so. I mean, if you have follow-up questions from what I send out, I can answer those if you email them to me, although I will be out of commission for the next couple of weeks. Or you can email Alex, and then when I return from vacation, I can certainly jump in again.
Yeah, and my preference would be to send your questions to me and have me be the conduit.
Yeah,
just so
definitely.
That we get all that collected together. Okay, well, with that, then let me pass it over to David. If there was something you wanted to say. I know it takes you a second to unmute on your phone.
Yes. So I just wanted to let the group know, and I wish I don't know that I could let the full group know this before it happened. So I spent about 45 minutes talking to a reporter yesterday that's been trying to chase me down since the summer. So I just, when and if that article comes out, I, believe me, read the rules of engagement 100 times. I am 100% positive I did not violate any of them, but I just wanted everyone to know so it's not a surprise.
All right,
And
thank
that's
you.
all I really had to say.
Thank you, David. And yeah, I can let folks know. I reached out to a reporter at the I guess you call it the Inky Mirror. Is that what you call it?
The dinky is fine.
Yeah, just to establish a point of contact so that he knew me and knew that he could come to me to ask questions about what's going on with the group as a whole. I will also not speak on behalf of the group, and will maintain all of my facilitator confidentiality and with any private conversations with people, as well as my neutrality in those conversations, but wanted to make sure that there was some capacity to come to me and ask me questions or speak to me as well.
Stacy,
Yeah,
if you're gonna do that, you should also do it with Nantucket Current.
yeah, I'll reach out to them as well. Okay, and then I have been asked to remind everyone, if you have not submitted your statements or gotten sworn in, to please do that. And we'll make sure that's Semanish, if you can flag that we want to mention that in our next email to folks.
Sounds good.
Stacy, can I just, sorry, I apologize. I should
Yeah.
raise my hand. What Dave Iverson mentioned about this, I think it's if it's the same person, it's an Inky reporter that's doing supposedly a series on short-term rentals. And I think that, I don't know when it's coming out, but this person's been working on this for several months. So I think a number of us may have spoken to him in the past. So it's just the way it is. It's not new.
Got it. John?
That's 100% accurate. So I think that I've spoken to them while this work group was in session, but if people have spoken before, I don't think we can really hold them too much, to be honest. So.
Okay, well, hopefully it's helpful and not unhelpful when it comes out. John?
That's my aim.
So Stacy, I was asked the question by Erica Mooney, whether
Yeah.
it's legally required for the members of this work group to be sworn in. And it's our considered opinion that it is not necessary.
Oh.
These are not, the work group members are not a committee or board for purposes of the statute that requires swearing in, and you're not considered officers of the town. Having said that, it certainly is fine to go to the town clerk's office and get sworn in, even though it's not legally required. There was one individual who I believe is in California. And so that makes it very difficult for that person. Obviously, they don't have to fly back to Nantucket to get sworn in. If they want to be sworn in, we've also advised Erica that under these circumstances, it would be permissible to do that remotely.
Okay, and that's new to me because Erica wrote me 2 days ago saying, please remind people to get sworn in, so.
Right,
Good.
and then, but I have responded since then. I believe it was yesterday.
Okay, good to know, good to know. But they are still required to conform to all the other sort of requirements as town.
Yes, conflict of interest, the open meeting law. The other thing I would tell all of you is if you use you don't have town email addresses, correct? You're using your private email accounts. You should check with Erica on what the protocol is for that. But even if you're using your private computer to email other members of the committee, those are public records. And if a public record is made for email communications among and between work group members, you will have to produce those emails to the supervisor of public records.
Okay.
You're all in stunned silence, I see.
John,
Yeah,
can
and-
you also confirm, does that also include texts? I think it does.
Yes,
Right?
it does. It does. Yes, it does.
So if
And-
you want a confidential conversation with me, call me.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
that-
yeah, I would.
Between the phones.
I actually think that's good advice. Not avoiding the use of emails or text messaging is a good thing.
Yeah.
Unless you're perfectly fine I should say, don't email unless you're perfectly fine with that being on the front page of the newspaper in a couple of months.
All right. Thank you all. I think we're going to end here. And if you have additional questions, either for on legal issues or on zoning issues or on data issues, please just forward them to me. I will get them to the correct sort of expert who is helping us with all of that, and we will try to get them all answered. Okay, thanks all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You the
You.
well.